Hello and welcome to the Anomaly Project, the show that looks at all aspects of the paranormal and anomalous world. I'm Marcus Lowth, and joining me as he does every week is a living legend that is Steve Mera. Now, Steve, this is going to be a fantastic show tonight. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, actually. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. I always look forward to listening to Trey and his revolutionary investigations and research that he's doing. There's only a handful of people I think really doing this type of work on the planet, and can't really emphasize how much it really is important for this type of research to be done. We've got to, we can't stay static any longer. It's driving us all mad. We've got to push forward and try and come up with some answers. And Trey's at the forefront of this, I'll guarantee.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as Steve alluded to there, our guest this evening is a researcher and author and director of Oxford Paranormal Society and Anomalous Studies and Observation Group, Mr. Trey Hudson. Trey, thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm wonderful. Things just couldn't be better. I'm super busy for a retired guy. I'm actually busier now than I was when I worked. And Steve, I want to thank you for the very kind words. I'm just doing what I think is right. I'm going out there and
Yep.
shaking the tree, trying to see what kind of interesting fruit falls. But thank you for the kind words. It
No,
uh,
you're
it makes
welcome. Very
makes it
welcome.
worthwhile.
Okay, so right then, Trey, I'm thinking, and I second what Steve said there. I'm thinking that the best place to start with this, and we've got a lot to talk about, is essentially with the meadow. Now, I realise
Yeah.
that this could be a long and drawn out answer. What I'd really like to know, and what our viewers would like to know, is what is the meadow? Where is the meadow?
Well,
What kind of thing goes on there? And I know that's an answer in itself. And I suppose, first of all, how did you become aware of it? What
Yeah,
drew?
that's a great question. First of all, I'm going to solicit some forgiveness from you and the audience. I am not going to give away the location. You touched the third rail of the Meadow Project, which is where is it?
Okay.
And the reason for that isn't because I'm trying to be confrontational or curmudgeonly. It's because this location is so special. It's so unique that if the location ever became public, publicly known, then it would be overrun by,
hmm.
thrill seekers and people that maybe aren't, really dialed in on how to do proper, thoughtful, and respectful research. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and apologize
I
and
understood.
solicit forgiveness from everybody.
That's
But
understandable. I mean,
yeah,
every scientist has got to protect their own laboratory at some point.
oh, yeah, and unfortunately, I've talked to some folks here in the States whose research areas have been outed, and pretty much once that happens, uh, probably 80% of meaningful research is over.
Hmm.
So, I will tell you this, okay, and everybody get your pen and papers ready. I will give you the location of the meadow. It is south of Virginia and east of Arizona, which is probably about two-thirds of the U.S. No, I'm kidding. It's in the South, in the Southland. But you know what? The meadow, it is what it sounds like. It is a beautiful bucolic mountain meadow. Very, very beautiful spot. Uh, but it is in an area that has a very rich history, and I go into this in the first section of my first book, a very rich history of high strangeness. And probably the benchmarks, the high water marks of high strangeness, if people want to look for their own, areas, is look for areas that have a concentration of UFOs. You can go to any, international or national or local UFO reporting group, find the locations that have a lot of UFO sightings, look for cryptid and other strange creature sightings. Of course, here in the United States, we have Dogman and Bigfoot are the two really prominent cryptids you have. And then dig into the folklore, go all the way back. Here in the US, we go all the way back to the First Nations, into Native Americans. In the UK, you might go back to some of the old Celtic folklore,
Yeah.
maybe old pre-Roman folklore, and bring it forward and see what sites are very special. When you see these concentrations, these geos concentrations of ghost folkloric ghost stories, Bigfoot, and UFOs, you'll see these areas that are just peppered with all three. And those are the areas where you start to look. And it just so happens that we were doing ghost research. I started off as a ghost guy. Uh, and now I tell people that I'm not a ghost. I'm a weird crapologist. If it's weird crap, I'm going to look into it,
Yeah.
regardless of the genre. And that's kind of how it started. Is we were looking for a haunted road that was folklorically significant in the region that we were researching, and the haunted road turned out to be a bust. It was one of those haunted roads where the specters will come up on the side of the roads and drag their greasy fingers along the side of your automobile and your greasy streaks along your bonnet and, just that whole thing. It was a bust. It was zero, big goose
Mm.
egg. But back at base camp, because we had a weekend expedition, is one of our members, Bob Wilson, had an amazing UFO sighting, which was a white orb rose from behind the trees, hung in the sky for a moment, moved sideways, and then winked out. Just like, I forget that haunted road business. This is where it's happening. And it just so happens logistically that about a half a mile to three-quarters of a mile away from base camp was a large field. And we thought that would be a really neat place to do research because this area, like I said, was known for UFOs and Bigfoot and ghost stories. It was a big open space. Imagine 8 acres. And being an open space, 4 reasons that we decided to start researching there. If anything moved across it, it was a giant track trap. It would leave marks as something transited across the field. Number two is being a big field that we could set up teams at night on the periphery, equipped with night vision and thermal, and anything moving across it would be visible and hopefully recorded. Number three, to the south of it was a high ridge that we could put teams up on top to look down and also possibly drive anything down into the field to be captured on video. And number four, it had a wide expanse of sky that we could see anything moving. So logistically, it just made sense. And just one of those rare things that happens in life is we hit pay dirt. We rang the bell, got the jackpot, and got it right. This area turned out to be so strange and so weird that people call it the Skinwalker Ranch of the South.
Yep. Yeah. It's geological locations like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And of course, obviously, when you look around, you can see how advantageous that can be, that
Right.
particular type of geology, that location. Environmentally, you'll be able to monitor sky, ground, and surroundings, which really is you want to be able to do cover all three, which is exactly what you're doing. So it's perfect location, really.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're just lucky when you come across these things if you find it. I've been to quite a number of places like that, but like you say, it's very problematic to keep in control on the location because the whole thing is that you don't want to cause any reflex regarding the data.
Mhm.
So you have a specific way of obtaining that data, which is dependent on controlling of that environment. Anybody said, got to control the environment, like any form of research in any geological location. So understandably, keeping this quiet in regarding the location, I certainly would advise that. Absolutely. We've had to do that ourselves.
Mhm.
And it's not because we don't want people to kind of really know where it is. We're researchers ourselves. We'd love to shout it from the rooftops, but we know that it affect the data, and it's an opportunity to gather really good data, and that's what you've been doing for quite some time now. So obviously, I can understand that you wouldn't want that to waver in any way.
Yeah, and it's so very much true. It's we want to try to keep the area as pristine and as inviolate as possible. And by being a little selective about who we invite to come research with us. And I've had many, many, many guest researchers. I could name some names. You would recognize some of the names. But the inverse of that, is the other side of the same coin is this is not my story. This is not the story of the Anomalous Studies and Observation Group. This is the world's story. And
Yeah.
that's why I've been so, proactive in, sharing it with the world. I've published 2 books. There's a documentary that's going
Yes.
to be distributed here pretty soon. And, I want the whole world to know about this because, we can't keep this light under a bushel. And I always like to have other eyes look at what we're experiencing. And I have to admit that, Steve, you gave me some great advice on the differential time meter. That's now a part of my kit, and we've
Yeah.
detected a little bit of differential time, at this
Yeah.
location.
Mm.
I'm seeing your surprised face here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so and I'm always open to other researchers and Steve, as we say here in the South, bless your heart. I think you got drafted into the Meadow collaborative, and so you're up to your eyeballs in that whole
Well,
aspect of it.
I'm always glad to help. I mean, we're all on this same path. It is a very difficult path because there's so much new data now that it
Mm,
really is going to change the paradigm of how we think what this phenomena represents. And it's about time, to be honest with you. This has been towing its line for a while now, and it's been teasing and deceptive at best. It's boggling, mind-boggling at best. But it's time that we do. We've got to get a hold of this, and
mhm,
there's a number of pioneers in this subject. One of yourself and a few others around the world, which are trying their very best. But it's complicated, and it's very difficult to try and understand because we've been socially conditioned to think this particular way.
mhm.
We are living in a reality which is literally a box in a sense. But the phenomena is outside this box. And this is the problem, is that we're using fundamental sciences that we know to try and explain the things that don't fall in that box. This is why, you've got to start looking at new devices, new
Hmm.
equipment, new discoveries, because that's where that information is going to lie. It's going to lie outside that box because we've been trying to solve that for many, many years.
Yeah,
God,
oh, I'm sorry, Marcus.
sorry, Trey, I was just going to ask you there. I mean, I want to speak about some of your, I'm sure Steve will as well, some of the anomalous,
Oh,
subjects that you've experienced there. But I understand you've got a career in security, a background in security. Now, listening to you speak there when you were, planning out the logistics of the meadow, and you were saying, you got access from, you can see the air, you can see below, you can see everything. So it's clear there, listening to you, that you can't. It's a transference of skills, basically, right there. But thinking wider, do you think that background in security maybe helps how you actually investigate the paranormal in general? It's just an interesting thought that pops up.
yeah, that's very good because I started off my career as a U.S. Army intelligence officer, and part of that is you are an analyst. You're trained to be an analyst, and I will tell people I am not a scientist. I am an analyst. Big difference. I am not necessarily looking for definitive truth or indisputable facts. I'm looking for indicators and signatures. And one thing that I was an intelligence officer during the Cold War, way, way, way back when. And some of the things that we would look for is like certain electromagnetic signatures that were given off by certain pieces of Russian equipment, Soviet equipment. And we would see these signatures and we could extrapolate if that piece of equipment has this unique electrical signature, then we can tie it to like a ZSU 2324 anti-aircraft device, for example. And I know divisionally how that's placed under Soviet battle doctrine. And then I can extrapolate kind of where the lines of organization are of a Soviet, motorized rifle regiment. I can't tell you for 100%, but I can give you a pretty doggone good guess. And that's what an analyst does. So I take that skill set and I bring that, all the way forward into the 21st century. And something that I find very intriguing is certain signatures indicate areas of high strangeness and occurrences of high strangeness. And Steve and I just touched on that a little bit earlier. Uh, Differential time variances is a signature. Geomagnetic differences, like the Doorway Project, not so much at the Meadow, but at other places, most definitely. Something that's definitely a signature at our site, are small, tiny radiation spikes.
Mm.
And I'm talking like a background, let's say 0.06 microsieverts per hour, and it will spike to 0.13. And if it goes from 0.33 to zero point 0.6 is usually when we start encountering pretty strange phenomena like missing time, uh, just all kinds of strange disorientation, things like that. So, these indicators and signatures are what I'm looking at. So if we can develop a set of signatures, perhaps we can have the right people, the right equipment, and the right skill set there when it happens, and we can gather more data, develop more theories, and move forward. And we're coming up with some pretty unique tools in the toolbox. I'm not an expert on it, but quantum analysis is really big right now. And there are some absolutely astonishing, groundbreaking things coming out of that basically validates my past 9 years of research.
Yes,
Steve,
there's
I
the
mean, I know,
validation.
I
Yeah.
know you like your devices and you're really au fait with all this stuff. So, I mean, I'm sure you second everything that Trey's saying there. I mean,
Yeah. It will. It really is. I mean, I think also though what you got to really is keep at the forefront of your mind is the possibility of biological or chemical hazards
Mhm.
because we are, and Trey is, dealing with things of unknown origin. That's basically it is unknown in scientific terms that we refer to as an unknown unknown. These
Right.
aren't known unknowns, they're unknown unknowns. So there's always going to be the possibility of things happening. And of course, the longer you get into that, you do get little, you can write out in a little book of many different little things that you think, okay, this is part of it. But you can be deluded to, what they actually really are until it actually happens. This is kind of one of the problems that we're often faced with. But you are right. I mean, biologically, yeah. I mean, I think people. Let's not forget the fact that, of course, people are equipment as well, and the right type of person
Yes.
can make a flower blossom. And I know that through utilizing specialized catalysts
Yes.
in location, and I've seen them literally open a door. I mean, we've got statistics over a month, and that one day they come, it's just like a flood of craziness that happens. So there is something which is also interacting with certain individuals as well, which can be utilized as part of the experiments, of course.
100%. That's one of our mission statements for the Anomalous Studies and Observation Group is we look at both the empirical and the experiential
So yes,
because the best piece of equipment you can have out there to detect high strangeness is a human being.
it is.
And if you look at it from a philosophical point of view, if the experience is happening and there's not a human being to experience it, what's the point? Why bother?
Yeah.
So Steve, you hit the nail right on the head. Absolutely. And we've actually had now we're having high strangeness experiences happen away from the meadow. Extreme high strangeness. Like we were on an expedition, actually it was a Bigfoot expedition a few weeks ago, and we had one member who's a member of the Meadow Project and a young lady who's a nurse who was brand new to this other Bigfoot organization that we were with, and they had temporal displacement, bilocation,
That's not a good feeling.
nausea.
Mm,
Uh, they felt like they weren't part of their bodies,
hmm. Yeah.
and so, bless her heart, this was her first outing ever for anything. So,
Mm,
there was a little bit of, we're hoping to try to get any PTSD kind of tamped down before it gets too bad. But, and I know Steve and Mark is both familiar with the hitchhiker effect.
yeah.
And, there are people that, are magnets to this stuff. And, and I have
It
to,
really is.
and I
Yes.
have to do a mea culpa on this being a Bigfoot expedition. I didn't have my Geiger counter with me and my tri-field and all of my really good stuff. So I was caught a little bit flat-footed, but it's yeah, the phenomena once it sees you, once it hears you,
There you
and once
go.
it develops a rapport with you, it's always going to be there and it will
Always.
always manifest in ways that you do not expect.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this, I mean, what it does is it's targeted individuals. It's like a hook in the skin. You've caught their eye, and but then it can pass through your circle like a virus,
Right.
and infiltrate. But never think you're not being observed now, because I know that you've been in this
Oh,
situation now long enough that I know that you're being observed.
oh yes.
So that's what happens.
Trey,
No,
I wonder if I can
absolutely.
ask you about, speaking about being observed and things you have actually observed and the phenomena observed. You mentioned, you spoke a lot about a cube, basically,
Hmm.
like a shadowy cube. And I believe you liken this to a portal or a
Right.
gateway or something like that. Could you talk to us a little bit about that? Because I believe that, or I suspect that seems to be central to what's going on, or at least it was.
It was, it's a very unique thing. Firstly, I'll preface it that cubes are a very important uh, geometric archetype in high strangeness. Now, why that is, I don't know, but you can go all the way back to the Old Testament, bring it all the way forward. Cubes are very important.
Mm.
So, in 2017, in February to be precise, we were just starting our investigations. We'd had some pretty strange stuff happen in July of 2016, but in 2017, we were out there with our thermals, our night vision, and all doing an investigation, doing research. And I had a team moving across the top of the ridge, like I said, to the south of the meadow. And one of my team members looked through his thermal down into the meadow, and he says, "That's strange. There seems to be an electrical or fiber optic interface box. You'll see them on the side of the roadways. They're just a cube sitting, on the side of the roadway where you have your telephones and all your electrical stuff in there." And he goes, "I've never noticed that before. That's very odd." And he says, "Trey, take a look through your thermal. What do you see?" I look and I see a small herd of deer. Nothing at all like what he saw. So our experiences were different.
Mhm.
Okay, this becomes important. We were experiencing the world in two very different ways. So I, take out my normalcy box and I jump right in it and I close the lid and I said, "Oh, those are just deer. That's what you saw. You just saw deer." And I know better than that, but our bias towards normalcy is very strong. So another team member, he brings his thermals up and he sees two man-sized heat signatures. And I'm not going to say man-shaped, I'm going to say man-sized, about 1.75 meters tall, maybe three quarters, half a meter wide. So a 6 foot tall, maybe about 20 inches wide. And this heat signature is small, and it gets tall, small, tall, small, tall, splits into two, and then winks out. And it's like, well,
Oh.
that's very odd. And this becomes very important later on.
Mm.
So we work our way down the ridge and drop into the extreme west end of the meadow. We get a call on the radio from one of our surveillance teams who is equipped with two thermals, radio, and all their equipment. And they said, "Hey, we keep seeing these boxes pop up on our thermal, and they are colder than the surroundings." Now, there's a lot of theories on why high strangeness and paranormal activity is colder than the ambient temperature. There's also some evidence that cryptids may have this capability too. So
Mhm.
they're seeing these cold cubes or boxes in the meadow. So we're like, "Okay, well let us vector over to you and we'll take a look." So as we're moving, they're seeing these boxes move around. About the time we get to them, the big box that was directly in front of their location had pretty much dissipated. And they finally started recording, and all that was really left on the thermal imagery on the video was a very faint outline of a box, very faint. And if anybody watched me on Discovery Channel last year, that's the video that we were talking about.
Mm.
And so we decided to vector a team into it, 4 members. And when these team members got to the edge of the remnant of this box, their thermal signature completely disappears, like gone. There is no thermal signature. Where their thermal signature was white hot a few seconds before, it's now completely obliterated, obscured. Uh, and we did a recreation, and I've taken other researchers out there, and there is nothing out there that would obscure your heat signature to that degree. You would always have some remnant of a heat signature in this environment. Remember, it's February. There are no leaves on the trees. The foliage is dead. Very wide open space. So while they were in there, they described this experience as thus. It was like walking inside of a dark velvet bag, or for people that are familiar with the theater, blackout curtains, heavy velvet curtains that completely obliterate sound, light, and everything. So it was like a very feeling of nothingness, walking into a void. They did not encounter any encumbrances when they went in. No brambles, no briars, no branches, nothing. They walked in unimpeded. and the temperature dropped. So after about 90 seconds in this reality they were in, they turned around and they came back out. On their way out, they started encountering brambles and briars and having to fight their way through the brush to get back out. That wasn't there before when they went in. So, what's interesting is it appears that there were two realities existing at the same time, kind of like the Schrodinger's meadow, okay, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
There are two realities, and depending on what part of the meadow you're observing it from, dictates your reality. So what we're seeing is kind of like the dual slit experiment where light is both a particle and a wave at the same time. We're seeing quantum effects and quantum natures of matter on a macro scale at this meadow. And to make it even more sad is of the four people that went into that cube, only two are still alive.
Mm.
And that goes back to what Steve was talking about. There is a danger to this, and I would be negligent if I didn't at least bring that up, that there is a very real, no kidding, physical, spiritual, and psychological danger to this work if you're not prepared for it. So, we were able to capture that on video, on thermal, and I had it reviewed and analyzed by numerous people. The number one thing that everybody wants to know, it's not a hoax. Okay. Number two, it has not been manipulated, that nobody's been able to find any indication of manipulation. And it is authentic. Quantum analysis is starting to show some very interesting stuff with that video. Specifically, Seth Feinstein from MUFON in Colorado has found additional figures standing next to the box as the team was going in that were not visible with the naked eye. What makes it more interesting is while our thermal operator was filming the cube and the team, she pans to the right and she sees two heat signatures standing in a small copse of trees. And she says, "Who or what are those?" Everybody carries radios. Nobody gets off station unless they're given permission when we're researching. Those were not team members. Those were unknown human-sized heat signatures watching us from the tree. Now, remember what we saw earlier were the heat signature turning into two. So you go back and you look at some of the work in other places of high strangeness with areas that gateways, portals, those are labels, those are terms where things may come out of, may transit from wherever they are into our world, our dimension, our reality, and then return. So, we've also had my case, an extreme case of a disorientation at probably 40 yards from that location. Personally, we had a corresponding radiation spike of 0.33 microsieverts per hour when that disorientation happened. So there's something about that area in the meadow that seems to be transdimensional, if you will.
Yeah.
So
Can I
that's
just can I
that's the
interrupt
cube.
you there, Trey? Can I just
Yeah,
interrupt you? I'm
please.
very sorry. It's just I feel it's just really relevant here. You just mentioned there transdimensional, the dimensions, and you mentioned a few minutes ago about cubes being important in ancient writings and ancient legends,
Oh yeah.
and ancient knowledge, and things like that.
Back to the Tazarats.
Yeah, I mean, I was
Yeah.
listening to something the other day. I was listening to I forget his name, so I apologize. A scientist speak about this, and what he was saying is, when you get to a cube, you're speaking of the third dimension. And he was saying when you go to the fourth dimension, you're talking about a cube within a cube, and the fifth cube within a cube, and so on and so on. So do you think that's got anything to do with what's happening there at the Meadow?
I think that, yeah, I think the cube is a three-dimensional shadow of a multi-dimensional being, existence, mechanism, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's how it manifests into our world, our Newtonian, Euclidean, three-dimensional understanding of the world. You go all the way back to the Old Testament. The Ark of the Covenant was kept in the tabernacle as the Israelites or the Hebrews moved through the desert. The tabernacle was shaped like a cube. When the temple was eventually built, the Holy of Holies was shaped like a cube. There's a very old structure in Saudi Arabia in Mecca
Yeah.
called the Kaaba, okay, which predates Islam, predates Christianity. It is a cube. In the corner of that cube is a piece of a meteorite that was worshipped as a otherworldly visitor. In the New Testament, when John the Revelator was in prison, he talked about the New Jerusalem coming down from the sky with the return of Jesus. And the New Jerusalem was described as a large translucent cube, 1,400 miles cubed on each side. The alchemist talked about a thing called the prima materia, which was the basic building block of matter on which everything was built. The prima materia was represented visually by the alchemist as a black cube. You come into start moving into the 20th century, the Carl Higdon case in Wyoming. He was abducted by an alien flying a translucent cube. Some of the revelations coming out from the U.S. Department of Defense, aviators talk about seeing a cube inside of a sphere. So there's something about a cube being representative of these multi-dimensions or other single dimension or paradimensional entities interacting with our world. And the cube holds a very interesting place, in our consciousness. And it's so much so that when Carl Jung had his lakeside villa built, one of the effigies that he had put on the side of the lake was a large stone cube.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. I mean, Steve, have you got any thoughts on that? Because I mean, you have various black cubes around certain installations, corporations
Right.
around the world. It's there's something to this, surely.
Well, yeah, it's definitely something that goes back in ancient times, and of course, when you talk about Mecca and stuff, and the communications allegedly had was to praise the rising sun, which is exactly what they do with the Wailing Wall. But that is actually also linked into ritualistic practice in communication with NHI, interestingly enough. So it's there are symbolistic things which have been passed on in ancient times and even in current times, which still get utilized. There are people that know, probably not so much on the research side, but know in regarding the communication of NHI or trying to work with them in some way, but it tends to lead to worship and homage and all sorts of things. But don't get me wrong, if you do that and shake hands with these things, then it can be beneficial in, being successful in business and corporations and wealth and success and health and things like that. But sometimes it can come at a little bit of a cost. I mean, this is the biggest thing that we always worked out for many years ago, is that there is high deception and hyper elusiveness. People are crying out all over the world about disclosure. We are never ever going to get disclosure because the phenomena does not want to do that. It is designed experts at making sure we don't have that. So, and the control mechanism for them goes a lot deeper than what we think, even into governmental, facilities and establishments. But, there is an intelligence that can be tapped, but we are not at the driving wheel. So when it comes to researching this, rather than just opening our hands out and say, please, can you give us something? When you start to research it, then you start to have to literally wade through a veil of mechanisms. And getting through them, there's learning things. And obviously the biological and chemical hazards are involved, and the environment is very, very associated. There's no randomness in regarding where these things take place. They're there for a reason. And they're usually long term. But once you gain some knowledge, is that you gain their attention. And of course, then what you do is, when you end up going somewhere else, you'll find that the reactions or the stuff that you're experiencing there is become hyped, because it's your involvement, because you've kind of been it kind of emphasizes through you, in a sense of speaking. So success rates go up, absolutely. But that's because basically you've been in an association with this, and kind of, if you want to call it some type of spiritual charging, because some people like to refer to it that. In other words, it seeps into you, and therefore wherever you go, you become some type of magnet to some degree. That tends to take place. So it does have this spiritual element. And of course, science, as soon as you start going down belief systems and spiritualism, science says just shuts the door. So I'm sorry,
Mhm.
but we don't want to deal with that. But the thing is, there's fundamental evidence there that it's interactive through those purposes. So you can't ignore it. There is a fundamental part of this which is still there. And this is why we've all got these questions about, well, how can the occult be tied into some of this stuff? How can the paranormal or the supernatural? Well, it's because it's all one thing. And the
Right,
phenomena
exactly.
delivers as it wants to deliver to individuals in its own way.
Yeah, I was so lucky that I studied under Bill Roll in college, William Roll, and so they had a very the humanistic and transpersonal psychology department that I got my degree from was very open to that. So I didn't have that academic lid shut on me, in my informative years. But you touched on something which I think is very important, and I liken it to having a transistor radio. Is you're playing around with your transistor radio and you find a station you really like because let's say you hear Us and Them by Pink Floyd, which is one of your favorite songs. It's one of my
Yeah.
favorite songs. But you find that and you're like, oh wow, I really like this radio station. And you're sitting at a beach and you think, well, this beach must be really important because I can hear this radio station here. Well, everywhere you carry that transistor radio from now on out, you're going to be able to receive that station. And it's not the beach, it's you tuned to the right frequency.
This is it. That's
And
exactly.
that's exactly what it's it. And the phenomena, and yeah, Steve's going to nod his head and smile when I say this, it evolves. The phenomena you encountered last year is not the phenomena you encounter now, and it is not the phenomena you're going to encounter 6 months from now. As you develop a rapport, as you develop a degree of familiarity with the NHI, it's going to start interacting with you in much more personal ways. And I'm talking about precognitive dreaming.
Mm.
I'm talking about uh, aports. I'm talking about, things like that will start to encounter. I'm talking about high incidences of synchronicity
Yeah.
are going to start to become commonplace in your life. And you really have to be grounded, to be able to deal with this when it, pokes its finger into your normal, average humdrum day-to-day life.
Trey, can
Yeah.
I ask? Can I ask you why do you think that it? Well, I mean, not why do you think it interacts with you, like you say, because you're paying attention to it. So I understand that, but is it a case that you're just more alert and you noticed it, or is there something about you that the phenomena noticed in you? What are your thoughts on that? If you've had any thoughts like that,
I will tell you this. I don't know. I mean, I'll
fair
be
enough.
honest with you. I
Yeah,
don't know. Imagine a road being built through a forest next to an anthill, and the ants come out of the anthill and they look at the road and they start sending their pheromones out trying to communicate with this piece of asphalt.
yeah,
They don't know what a road is, so they can't conceptualize what this thing even is. We're the ants,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it's
and the
refreshing to
NHI is
know.
the road. So I think the extreme otherness of this is probably beyond our comprehension. Now we can make guesses. We can interact. We've had some interaction using SDs and some other protocols. Uh, and you just have to take it at face value and maybe come up with a hypothesis, if you will, but realize that truth with a lowercase t, which is your experiences, will never equal uppercase T truth, which may be beyond our grasp until I believe, human beings are multidimensional creatures. I think studies at SRI, Duke University, Surratt, all these other Skull. I know Steve has talked about that we are multidimensional creatures. And I think that when we transit to that next dimension, maybe we'll have some of these answers. But as we're tied, in these meat suits, I think we're probably going to have to just be happy uh, t- trundling around with a big question mark, from time to time.
Yeah. I think it starts to, the more you, the longer you get into this type of studying, you end up conceiving an idea one day and you just kind of realize that how insignificant we are compared to this phenomenon because we thought we were being adaptive within the reality that we live in. But what if even the reality that we perceive, which is through consciousness, of course, is even manipulated by the phenomenon itself? Not just us, but the reality of what we experience in this world. And then you think, well, you might as well just put your pens down then, because you think to yourself, these things have got godly power. And it is. You write all the things down that people have experienced all throughout the world, and you look throughout all the biblical, scriptures and whatever, you will say, yeah, these have got godly power. And so I would never blame humanity to, accidentally perceive them as deities and gods. And this is why we have so many, because they have interacted in so many different ways with so many different people. It is a variety of phenomena. And we've always said, if you want to call them archetypes, or if for a proto-intelligence, or if you want to call them, say there are multiple masks, but the phenomena, tracing the phenomena seems to be the same. It kind of has the same traits throughout all history, but the mask is forever changing. There is a modern mask, and that modern mask might change depending on how social conditioning. I mean, the grey has never been so popular since the internet came along, and now we can't shake it because it's in our minds and in our hearts and in our screens of our computers every single day. So, when people are saying, where's all the Space Brothers gone? Yeah, that was probably to the internet, So I think as time transitions, we'll see various things as time goes on. But the problem is that they can infiltrate at every level. And sometimes it's, there's no restriction through making any equipment work beyond its capabilities to do so. Your computers, your phone, no matter what equipment you might work with, they can manipulate to the point where you're scratching your head saying, well, how can that work? It's not even designed to do that. Well, they like to show this, and they like to show that they are metaphysical.
Mm.
The choice of being physical or non-physical. This is what we've got to get our heads around. This compartmentalization into different areas when it's all one soup. And
Mhm.
secondly, that we're dealing with parameters that get out, forget what you know, just empty that knowledge out, fill it up with some of the new stuff, metaphysical phenomena and quantum mechanics. This is kind of the area it's going to lead us into further discoveries, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you talked about equipment operating in ways that was not intended. Like I'm a big fan of the skull experiment, project. I've always have been, and it reminds me of the 35 millimeter undeveloped film placed inside the box, and when it was developed, it was one long scroll
Yeah.
of writing. It's like that's not how film and cameras work.
No.
That's not how this is supposed to materialize. And I always tell people, they say, "Well, what do you think is going on?" And I'll be honest with them. I'll say, not only do I not have the answers, I don't even really know what the questions are.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it.
Absolutely.
It's magic.
Trey, can I,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
good point.
magic.
It's a good point to ask it because we're speaking about different masks and phenomena wearing different masks, which I think is absolutely correct. I'm sure you do too. It's a good point to speak about. You had a woman in black experience, which was essentially a man in black experience, but it was a woman who was completely misdressed for where she was. Could you speak to
Yeah,
us about that?
yeah, that was very strange. And that particular incident, is still, like I said, I don't have the not only not a, don't have the answers. I don't even know what the questions are. The way that happened is we the night of the cube in the portal is we received a radio transmission back from my base camp operator, and he said, "Hey, Trey, there's somebody here that you need to see." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll see you when I get back to camp." And he's like, "No, no, no, it's somebody else." So we were kind of we were arguing. I'm not going to say discuss. We were arguing: do we stay in the meadow or do we go back and do an after action review, try to capture everybody's you do a cognitive interview, try to capture everybody's experiences while it's still fresh. When we opted to go back to base camp, I get back to base camp, and here we are in an area that is so remote, there's not even cell phone service.
Mm.
miles and miles and miles and miles of dirt and gravel roads to get there. There's a businesswoman waiting for me at 10 p.m. at night in February in the middle of nowhere. And she's wearing loafers, slacks, a blouse, and a blazer, very much like Steve's posh blazer he has on right now.
Yeah.
And so, and she starts trying to interject herself into our operation. She starts asking a lot of questions. She's behaving like she's missing social cueing, like she doesn't understand by our body language and the way we were talking that maybe we were busy and she needed to leave. She kept wanting us to accompany her down a deserted road to look for something that she called monkey bears, which she described as small Bigfoot type creatures, small Sasquatch type creatures. And she came up to me and she started trying to make small talk. And she says, "Oh, well, did what's your background?" And I said, "Well, I graduated from the University of West Georgia, several years ago." And she goes, "Oh, I did too." She goes, "What was your degree in?" I said, "Well, my degree is in psychology." She goes, "Oh, mine too." And I'm like, okay, she's just parroting back what I tell her. I'm going to trick her. I'm going to be Mr. Sly. I said, "Who are some of your favorite professors there? Who are the ones that really made a mark on your life?" And she started naming people that I knew personally. Dr. Rice, Dr. Richards, Mike Ahrens, who was a student of Abraham Maslow, people that were really influential in my life. I thought, okay, this is just too weird. This is like the synchronicity is off the scale. So to make matters even stranger, she squatted down in front of us and urinated right in front of us, which I don't know about in the UK. That's kind of strange here in the States. No, I'm kidding. I've been to was in the UK not too long ago. I didn't see anybody urinating and squatting and urinating. So now maybe in Bromley. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Okay, nobody harassed me. But so anyway, so it just was very odd. And we eventually got her to shoo and go away. And I started thinking about it, and I dug out some of my old John Keel books and started looking back through some of his experiences. And I'm like,
yeah,
high strangeness, person appears out of nowhere, inappropriately dressed, doesn't understand social cueing, doesn't understand how people interact in a polite society, and gives off a feeling of oddness or dread.
That's it. That's the key. Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a woman in black. It was so strange that one of my team members, who was a former U.S. Army Special Operations guy, I went to him and I said, "Tim, do you have your pistol with you?" And he says, "Yes, I do." And I said, "Well, I have mine too." I said, "What you and I are going to do is we're going to go about 50 yards outside the perimeter of the camp in the dark, and we're going to move around and patrol the perimeter because I don't know if she left somebody here to ambush us." Yeah, it was that weird. It was just strange. Yeah. And these aren't people that get shook up. These are, law enforcement people, military people, emergency medicine people, people that are used to handling weird situations or stressful situations rather. So fast forward, I wrote my book, I'm doing podcasts and stuff, and I get this message from a psychoanalyst in Istanbul, Turkey. Okay. And you want to take a guess at where this psychoanalyst graduated from?
Your university, I'm guessing.
University of West Georgia, same place I did, and the Monkey Bear lady.
Absolutely. Wow.
And he's talking about a place of high strangeness in the area, Carrollton, where we all went to university. And he said, "Hey, tell me about the Monkey Bear lady." And I told him about it, and he goes, "I might know her because she gave a name. We did some research on her, and it looked like a real person." Now, then you start getting into the doppelganger effect, a whole bunch of other stuff. And he goes, "Do you mind if I talk to her about it?" And I said, "Absolutely not. I'm not into outing anybody. She was acting very strange. She is in a profession that requires a licensure by the government. So I don't want her to get in any trouble." It was very weird. And so he talks to her and he comes back and he said, "Number one, I do know her. She's a friend of mine. And during university, she was always one of those people that seemed attuned to the other.
Ah,
And he said, she always seemed to be the one that was very precognitive, seemed to be dialed into things like that. And he said she says that she had had a stressful day at work. She was out riding around. She had seen it had just happened to be driving through our base camp, saw a sticker on somebody's car that had like a Bigfoot or something. And she wanted to come back later in the middle of the night and tell us about her monkey bear experiences. And I'm like, okay,
mm,
I'll take that for what it's worth. And then this time last year, she contacts me out of the blue. And she says, I just, I talked to Matt, who was the psychotherapist in Istanbul. He says, I just want to, tell you that I'm a real person. I'm not a woman in black. I wasn't under the control of anything. And, the reason I urinated in front of everybody is I just had to go. Never mind the fact that there was an outhouse, you know, within sight. And she says, just that's what that was. It wasn't anything mysterious or strange. And so now, I have a whole chapter in my second book about the monkey bear lady and the recent revelations. I don't know. I really don't know. The synchronicities were so profound. The strangeness was so profound. Even my friend Matt, he has a section in his latest book about it. The big thing is, she's just maybe was one of those people that's just in tune to something, and something compelled her to be there.
yeah,
Because, when you start really peeling back the layers of the onion in this, there seem to be less and less coincidences and more synchronicity.
yeah.
So now what the synchronistic value of that experience was, I really don't know, but it was very profound.
Yeah,
Mm,
it
yeah.
sounds very profound. I mean, you mentioned synchronicity there. It's probably a good time to get your thoughts on this, Steve. I'm sure you've got some. How important do you think synchronicity is here? I mean, if we're speaking of a phenomenon or the other or whatever you want to call it, do you feel it's working to an agenda? And do you think these synchronicities are almost part of that agenda, and as if like almost trying to guide you in one way or another, or do you feel it's just there to be observed?
Hmm.
Sorry, is that directed at me or
That's
Trey?
Trey first. Sorry, Steve, and then
Oh,
I'd love to
okay.
get
Yeah,
your
yeah.
thoughts after because I'm sure you've got some.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to my favorite term. I don't know because I really don't know.
Yeah,
It
no,
could
that's fine.
be there could be some sort of metaphysical significance to it, or it could simply be all compasses point north, just a unique phenomena. I do know that every time that I encounter a significant synchronicity, it kind of re-energizes and refocuses my work.
Yeah. Mm,
Uh, and it makes sometimes even the most mundane experiences take on a significance that maybe you would have missed before. That you'll look at and say, okay, now I understand why that rock was in the trail at that particular moment. Now I understand. Now I see the significance in it. So, if you look at it from a commonality and put value on it, then maybe it's a way of taking everyday experiences and calling our attention to it to point towards a larger truth. Now, once again, lowercase truth, not uppercase truth. Maybe that's one of its ways to interact with us is manipulating space time and causing certain things to line up to call our attention to it, to say
yeah.
maybe, hey, I'm here, I'm still listening. Don't forget about me. Send me a postcard every once in a while. Or it could simply be as you become aware of this, as you change, your multidimensional being changes, and you're more aware of this, then maybe all the compasses, the needles start to point north, and you start to notice things that were always there before. So sometimes I feel like they're significant, maybe communicative. Then other times I'm like, maybe it's just a phenomena that I'm just noticing that doesn't have a whole lot of significance. So I'm on the fence about that. Depending on what I eat for breakfast, I'll waver one way or the other.
Perfectly understandable.
Yeah.
Steve, I'm sure you've got some thoughts on this. I know you have. I mean, what are your thoughts, my friend, on that?
Well, what we kind of recognise, because it is part of the phenomena, is the synchronicities or multiple serendipities, and call them what you will. It is part of it. But after such a long time of having them, which are very guiding sometimes, very assistful sometimes, and will send you also in the opposite direction. Sometimes it just depends. I see the phenomena as an outer circle and an inner circle. It doesn't like you to take a step on the inner, but it will play with you on the outer. And it's for me, it was I've spent hours trying to figure out what the I don't know was, as Trey's saying, but I theorize that it's a directive change in our reality.
Mhm.
And like putting a full stop, the next letter starts with a capital T or capital whatever. And it is those capitals that we recognize as these incidents because there's something significantly a twist in reality that something has changed and we see a pattern of that change. That pattern of change comes in multiple serendipities, coincidences, call them what you will. But, I mean, you could be talking about something and then the next day you get a phone call for it and you
Mhm.
think, no, this is guided assistance. Now, the guided assistance will help you put dots. Don't get me wrong, they don't want to be completely in the dark. They want us to learn, but only learn what they want to know. Let us learn, and like greedy kids at a sweet shop, we just can't help trying to grab everything at the same time. And I don't think they'll allow that. But at the same time, though, I think they want to assist. I want to try and point us in the right direction, assist us in certain ways, open up doors. But when you're suddenly just thinking, wouldn't it be great that? No, it happens. So opening up doors, yes, it's assistful, but that's on the outer circle. The inner circle is, yeah, we don't like you messing in there, and they'll let you know about it,
Mhm.
So, but we don't know where that parameter lies between the outer and the inner. So we're randomly going in sometimes where maybe we shouldn't go because there are no warning signs to say you've just passed the perimeter of safety here. But I see it as a pattern, a mechanism, like there's some type of reality, and the mechanism of reality it's not changing. I don't think it changes everybody. I don't think there's a big jump for everyone. I think it's interpersonalized for you about what you're doing, which means that you're being monitored and you're being assessed in regarding can we help? Can we do this? Can we put opportunities in his way? Can we steer him in this direction? Can we take him to take a right instead of a left? I think I see it as kind of that, but trying to prove this though is next to impossible. You're talking theoretical sciences here. We're still trying to wrap our heads around about how many dimensions there are.
Right.
But it's a tricky one. But I kind of see it as some type of a clue now, as okay, there's another little shift in reality. What's just happened? A glitch or whatever. But it's
Mhm.
steered by something. It's intelligent.
Yeah, you mentioned something and it just popped into my mind that, when we start sticking our toe across the line into the inner circle, that it, becomes maybe somewhat cross with us.
Yeah, the
Is we
course
had that,
follow.
yeah,
Yeah.
we had that exact experience with when we were using the Estes method protocol actually in the meadow where the cube was. And it was we were having bilateral communication, and then I started asking about specific phenomenologies,
Ah.
plasma energy, uh, microsingularities, and it became very agitated.
Mm.
When I started really drilling down, into maybe some of the nuts and bolts of observable phenomena. And it just made me think about that when you said, sometimes we can get right up to the line, but if we cross it, it'll push back and let us know.
Yeah, it really does, Trey. I mean, there has been times when we've just been arrogant in our earlier days. Now we kind of morph with it a little bit because over the years we've kind of understand that we've got to gel with it to some degree. But in the early years, early years of Project Doorway anyway, in the first, second, third year, we were bulls in a china shop. We really were. We were just bombarding in, and of course, not accepting the fact of what consequences might lie ahead. And we had to learn the hard way, and it got to the point where, we were dealing with the little minions and kind of shrugging them off, saying, oh, right, we must be onto something. Because one thing they don't realize is very good at is that reverse psychology is that, it fuels the fire. It's kind of, well, okay, if we're getting these reactions, we must be going in the right direction. So they'd be always act that way. It's just like, well, they don't think not to, they always retaliate. And it seems to be some type of hierarchy, but something, yeah, they sent a big boy in, and I was physically attacked in the house.
Mhm.
The same night, Barry's house was Barry Fitzgerald. He got wrecked. They pulled the light fittings out in his kitchen, and all hell broke loose. His wife was screaming, But we don't normally get that level. So we really pressed it and pressed it to the point where, okay, all right, we kind of, and this is why the respite protocols came in, because it was just getting under the skin too much, to be honest with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that. I can imagine that's exactly how it is. I mean, Trey, this might sound like a bit of a random question. And again, after Trey, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Steve, as well, actually,
Mhm.
because, locations are important. I'm sure you agree with that. Obviously, you do because, of the meadow and the work you're doing there. Quite often, these locations of high strangeness tend to be on ranches or in the middle of nowhere. And that could be the like you say, the electromagnetic energies, the geology of the area. Do you think if somebody, and it's just hypothetical, and I guess a bit strange, but I'd like to know, do you think if somebody just came along and bulldozed the land, built massive apartment blocks on there, shopping complexes, do you think this phenomenon would still occur? Or do you think that kind of thing would just, do you think it'd go elsewhere? I know it's a bit of a random
Good,
question,
good
but I'd
question.
be
Good
interested
question.
actually what your thoughts are.
I think that if you take a geographical slash geological location and you drastically change the nature of that location, you can change the nature that makes it unique and special.
Yeah.
Kind of like I'm a ham radio operator. If I had a dipole antenna cut to 40 meters, and I decide to whack off 15 meters of that antenna, it's not going to receive or transmit as well. So I think it's a certain gestalt of these locations where everything works for the greater good and the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Now, that doesn't mean that if you cut a tree, that's going to make a difference. I think it varies. You can have big changes that might not make much of a difference, or you might have little changes that make a huge difference. So there are cases where you've had these places that are very active. A lot of stuff is going on. Somebody changes either something minor or something major, and the activity stops. So yeah, I think there's something special. I think there's a unique gestalt to it that we probably don't understand, and I don't know if we ever will. But there are things that make these areas very special, very sacred. Take
Mm,
over the Glastonbury Tor,
yeah.
okay? A very, very special location going back thousands of years. It
Mm,
has a unique uh, je ne sais quoi about it that people can't articulate, but makes it a very special location. But if you were to bulldoze that down, it probably would change the nature of it. So yeah, I think you can change it. I think it does. I think you can change the resonance of an area by doing something like that. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, Steve, I'm
absolutely.
sure you agree. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Steve, basically?
Well, I think that these were plentiful more in ancient times. And of course, we've cultivated the land so much that we probably wiped out a lot of these locations. But we don't often see by location. We see it basically phase out due to cultivation of land in certain key areas. Ascension points are always of significance because we don't tend to change them much, such as mountains and things. And the phenomenon is rife on some of those places,
Mhm.
like the national parks, which have been like that since the dinosaur ages. So these are untouched land is more tapped with the source. It really, really is. And of course, don't get me wrong. I mean, you get paranormal things and stuff like that, even in the great cities, but
Mm.
this is not that type of phenomena. It's just a shadow of it. But it's if you really want to get to those locations, they're going to be in rural places where there isn't much footfall from men or women in those areas. It's just it likes to be like that. It likes to go ahead and do its thing, which is obviously whatever it's been doing for such a long period of time. But yeah, it goes back to ancient times. And I think there probably was a lot more of those locations. High strangeness might have been on a full planetary scale at one time. And we always question then when we look back and the ancients say, well, there's not one ancient society on this planet. It wasn't communicating with NHI. Well, what's changed? Well, we've cultivated the land, we've changed it and
Right.
everything. So now we've only got key locations around the planet. So this is why these areas get swamped with activity because they're forced to go only to certain locations.
And it's interesting that, in not only Western culture, Eastern culture, and all the cultures, there is a very strong instinctual, basic, almost animalistic dread of the dark woods. You go back and you look at folklore,
Yeah.
don't go into the dark woods. The woods, contain monsters and creatures and
Yeah.
stay away from there. And it's interesting that it surpasses cultures,
It really does. It really does. What's interesting is that when you've been doing this type of work for quite some time, and you may have noticed this, Trey, by now, that nighttime feels completely different.
yeah,
But you don't realize that until you get to a point and you realize, oh, doesn't night feel different? And I don't just mean because it's light deprivation. I mean, it really does. You can feel it inside. There is a difference. And it is right back from ancient times, there was guardship in regarding the dark. This is, whatever the sun hits was ours, whatever it doesn't was their domain. It still feels that way for those that can recognize it. A lot of we kind of lost touch in ourselves with this phenomena, but it's introducing itself seemingly a lot more. And of course, science, AI, and all sorts of damn things which are coming along, which is going to be prodding the line stage, of course. But it's interesting that you are right. Nighttime and especially wooded areas. I mean, people say to me all the time, "I'll get the heebie-jeebies," when I go, "No, what is that? What is heebie-jeebies?" Well, heebie-jeebies, or you can do lots of different names for it, is your survival sense kicking in. It's saying, look, it's just because I can't see it, just because I can't feel it, doesn't mean there's nothing there. It's telling you your survival sense is here within us. The problem is that we live in a world of poisons these days. What we eat, what we drink, what we breathe, consuming of refined sugar, it's going to cause adrenal weakness. It's going to cause your fight or flight not to work. You're going to disconnect yourself from your survival sense. We should rely on that more when we're out there because there is a mechanism there where the body says, warning, warning, there's something, like Will Robinson. Exactly, exactly.
yeah.
So it does
I
work
think
like
it's
that sometimes.
interesting as well when you talk about the mountains and you talk about the dark. You can incorporate caves into that as well. There's so many legends and folklore and mythologies which involve monsters coming out of caves and going deep underground and blah blah blah. And off the back of what we've just been speaking about there, some research has suggested the phenomena, the other, it, whatever you want to call it, um, and there's nothing, it's just theories, this, but I do find it fascinating that, this phenomena in one way or another is a manifestation of the universe itself. It just manifests, it comes into life in front of us in various ways. So with that in mind, and what you've just said there about if we kind of bulldoze these locations down so it alters the makeup and the energy of these locations, we're almost kind of say we're almost like putting credence into the knowledge of being at one with nature and being more in touch with the universe around us. So do you think it sounds really cliche and cheesy, but do you think there's any truth in that? And do you think that's what's driving these communications and interactions between the phenomena and ourselves?
Well, yeah, because in ancient cultures, is whenever somebody would go on a quest to better themselves, the Aboriginals would go on a walkabout. Native Americans here in the States would go on a vision quest. You go back and you look at Arthurian legend,
Mhm.
the quest for the Grail was a trip into the unknown to cause the development of self for self-improvement. So there's always been this whole idea of going into somewhere that's a wilderness. The Hebrews wandered around in the wilderness for 40 years, according to the Old Testament, to improve themselves. That was God's plan. If you go down that road. And so there's always this sense of, like Steve talked about, disconnecting, disengaging, withdrawing from your culture, from your family, from your society, and ultimately from yourself in order to step into that next realm, into that next place of understanding. And nature has always been a very huge and integral part of that, going all the way back to folklorically and beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Steve, we spoke to Debbie Cartwright a few weeks ago, and she spoke about shamanism. And again, I'd like to get both your thoughts. And I'll start with you, Stephen, and go back to you, Trey. I mean, shamanism to me, how she described it, and how many people describe it, it's almost like whether you want to say you're in a trance or whether you're going to another level, but you're almost in communication with non-human
Yeah.
intelligences. So again, it's all kind of fits together, doesn't it? A nice, neat package in a way.
It's all the one thing. It's just different doorways to get to that place. I mean, you do that through just simply through the meditation and fasting. You don't have to take, ayahuasca or other chemical things. You don't have to even stick a god helmet on and light up your brain, which is ridiculous because it's not necessary. But people are doing that, especially regarding psionic circles, which have been going on for a long time. But now they've upped the game using, god helmets and frequencies. The old dog whistle, which is, well, I can't tell you what the frequencies is there, but it's all one thing. They just don't realise that sometimes the people operating the devices is the key. And that's what makes you laugh because you think, oh, well, it didn't work for me. And yeah, well, that's because you're not using that guy over there. So it's we are integral part of this machine. We cannot rule out ourselves because we are part and parcel. Now, as far as I'm aware through the research that we've done, our association with this might even be genetic, and it might even be passed on genetically if we are having close encounters, traumatic paranormal incidences, which might leave certain traces within the brain, which might
Mhm.
even, we are getting there now, might even show that it could be passed on to your children or genetically. Hence, your grandfather was psychic, and you have these experiences. What is that? Well, it might be actually something that we're learning here. It could be an integral part. What I'm saying is the phenomenon might be an integral part of us. So don't consider it as it completely something foreign, because I think we have a bit of a dog in the race. Actually, I think to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, Trey, have
Eh,
you got any thoughts on that, Trey? Talk.
Yeah, you did mention the God helmet. I'm going to mea culpa here. We use the God helmet
Yeah,
uh, because we take people that are pretty much tuned into the phenomena and we use it to jumpstart, to basically send up a big signal saying, "Hey, we're here." But going
Yep.
back to you mentioned something that got me thinking is that traumatic experiences change brain structure,
that's right.
especially if you had, especially recurring child, what they call recurring childhood trauma or trauma while the brain is still developing. It changes the structure of the brain. Now, using the God helmet, the way we use it is we take a 40 hertz signal
Yeah, yeah,
and we bombard the left hippocampus.
yeah.
Okay, to basically excite that part of the brain that is more receptive to spiritual awareness and things like that. So, I never thought about, the rearrangement of brain structure on people,
It is.
you
With
know,
this, we've got to be. Yeah, I mean, there was different ways of enticing communication, and that's what we want because we all want to sort of kind of phenomena to be experienced so we can break it apart, look at the mechanisms, the paranormal mechanics of it, and try and learn about what it is. But these are different methods of doing this. Sometimes it can be a little bit forceful. We don't think that at the time, but we've also got to consider what is the relationship with people who are having those experiences through the initiation of the God helmets and doing that with the brain,
mhm.
because it's not a normal process unless you are in a specific condition which produces that in a geological location, which is slightly different, high magnetics and that sort of thing. Or you actually, if you're really very close to an electron diffusion region, that'd do it. you know.
And forgive me, I misspoke. I meant amygdala, not hippocampus. So, any
Yeah, yeah.
physiologist out there will just have to, spank me when they see me. But I meant amygdala. But yeah, it's and that goes back to something that I actually have experience with is I was trained as a coordinate remote viewer. So, I am able to, and I'm not as good at it as I used to be, but I was able to transcend and pull data from other places. And that is just another facet of the same diamond, like you were alluding to, that transcendental meditation,
Yeah,
a religious experience, illumination by a saint, or something like that is just another way of reaching the same, chocolatey center of the Tootsie Pop,
that's it. There is. I mean, it's just like divination, there are thousands of ways of divination, be it crystal ball or
Right.
palm reading, tea leaf reading, all tapping the source in their own comfortable manner. This is where we are today in modern times. We're trying to tap the source in various different manners. Some are better or more achievable than others. Um, Group consciousness is always seems to be better than singulation, so we're finding that, but then it's just the old stretch back to the original name of the church and the gathering of people. Really, that's what it's representative for. It's consciousness. But you are right, Trey. I mean, there are elements of this now which seemingly are showing up in the effects on the brain. Absolutely. But initially it was thought, oh, well, it's just a close encounter experiences, but it's not. It's highly traumatized paranormal phenomena as well,
Right.
traumatic.
Yeah.
So now we're seeing a bridge here between, which there always has been, because it's always been all one source, the phenomena anyway. But we're seeing the conditions right across the whole board, even probably into the cryptid phenomenon. If we do
Yeah.
enough research for people who've had the most traumatic of types of cryptid type experiences, you'll probably find the same results. But if it leaves a trait, if it leaves something behind, what's the next question is that can that be genetically passed on to your children if should you have children? And there's seemingly some evidence to point out that there is something. So your children might be slightly a bit more attuned,
Mhm.
because of your previous experience, and you think there shouldn't be no connection, and that might go on for quite some time. Could go through whole generations of family, to be honest with you. And we didn't know, which means then that we do have a dog in a race, really,
Yeah.
sometimes. And sometimes we're brought to an experience. Sometimes I don't think there's coincidences. Sometimes things happen for a reason. Sometimes they're initiated experiences that puts us in a place at a specific time, at a moment. And it's geared because we know through NHI communications, even through our experiments, that they know what we're going to do in the future, 19 months to the day, on a certain time, where we're going to be, not even in the same country. And we're thinking, how did he know this thing? Is the pair, can he steer it? And he must be steering it, because you think, well, where's my free will? Or
Mm.
they can look ahead, because we know they operate out of space and time as we know it. Look ahead and see where you are going to be 19 months' time, and relay that information back to be something demonstrative for you. And we've got 6 of these on record, which all come true. So it starts to wrap your head around trying to understand. They know what, if that's the case, then they know what we're going to do, then they're always one step ahead. Always, if that's the case.
It's a frightening prospect, actually. I mean, Trey, you mentioned about electrical signals, the brain. I think I'd like. I know we need to wrap this up, so I'd like to probably. This is probably a good place to end this. But we know that thoughts are essentially electrical signals, and they carry data to the rest of the body. What we see, etc.,
Right.
is electrical. And conventional science will say those electrical impulses and signals are contained within us. Some research suggests that it's actually outside ourselves, and that these electrical points
Yeah.
can connect to other electrical. People can turn off lights, sliders, for example. So there's that, and also you mentioned there about traumatic experiences. I know if head trauma can cause these signals to change and operate differently. Even alcoholism can cause electrical
Hmm.
signals to work differently in the brain. So really, what I'm thinking is, and I've mentioned this to other researchers, the human mind could be as much of a key to all of this as anything else.
Yeah. You just hit on one of my favorite subjects. Is we think of the human mind as that gray, squishy thing inside of your skull.
Mm.
Okay, the human mind is actually a four-dimensional, multidimensional object. It's a multidimensional organ. That's how we can do remote viewing. That's how we have precognition. And science has actually started to see quantum communications inside of the brain. That's how the brain can calculate so quickly. It's actually communicating outside of the three dimensions. So that means the brain is an extra dimensional organ.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So being an extra dimensional organ, we start looking at quantum realities which tie into things called source neutron. My mind just went completely blank. I'm sorry. Anyway, the cosmic subparticles that were created when the Big Bang happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so you have all knowledge that everything that was, is, and will be existing now in a quantum state. Now, the trick is tapping into that quantum state and pulling that data out. And, once again, we can go back to old writings that I am the Alpha and I am the Omega. Okay. I am the future. I am the past. I exist now. That's in the Bible. So that's a hint of what maybe this quantum state that exists now, where everything that ever is, will be, and is now exist, that can be tapped into. Now, in remote viewing, it's a cheesy name, but they call that the matrix. And you reach into that and you pull that through, you open up a liminal hole and you pull that data through. But that is basically people being trained to realize the multidimensional aspect of their brain. You go back to the Plato's cave thought experiment, where the prisoners that were chained to the wall could only see shadows. They couldn't see themselves, so they didn't know they were a three-dimensional object. They thought they were a two-dimensional object like the shadow they saw on the wall. And only until we finally take the shackles off and we look down at ourselves and say, we are greater than the sum of our parts. We are something much more significant. And when we can tap into that quantum nature of ourselves, the quantum nature of the universe, and the quantum nature of it, then we can start having true revelations, true self-awareness, and hopefully true communications.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, Steve, what are your thoughts on that before we wrap this up?
Absolutely. That's exactly it. Yeah. I mean, we got to, like I say, we're fundamentally part of it. Part of the problem we're trying to realize is fundamentally part of it, part with us. But we are learning, because it was never us and them. It's us. Or it's all together.
Right.
And it's bringing us closer to our understanding of what we're involved in, because like I say, we're part of it, but nothing's done by chance, and it does stay with you for a lifetime. As far as I am, 41 years. I mean, it came knocking on my door when I was 7. I've been researching for 41 years, since 83. But it was an opportunity for me because it came knocking on my door. I didn't knock on its door, it knocked on my door. And he's very, very persistent, and never left. But then, look what I'm involved in, and it's very difficult holding down relationships with girls that don't want to bring your homework with you, home with you. It's not easy, and sometimes it can be very testing. But a phenomenon will know it. It knows your vulnerabilities, and if it might not necessarily lie with you, it could be people around you, friends, relationships, that sort of thing. So yeah, you got to kind of play ball to some degree. You kind of got to gel with it in a sense. But when you first get into it, you're doing any other scientist. You're in explorative mode, and you don't take into consideration consequences when you're in explorative mode. That only comes later when you start analyzing results. But the more we research, Trey, into this, the more that you are adapting yourself with the phenomena, and eventually you end up gaining more about the things that you're trying to achieve. It's a process. It does take time. There's nobody can rush into these sort of things. It does, and it's about acceptance from them as well. Really, they've got to want to.
Right.
And some people, they will not interact with some people. I just know that. There's some people I know, they just do not want to know. And others, they really do. And in fact, it got to the point where communications came through to invite or to ask certain people to come. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, there's a means to what they want to do. But they are very selective. But what? It's a fascinating world that we're living in. And the thing is that you end up looking inwards on yourself. It's just something as mundane as going shopping, and you just got this moment of looking around the store and thinking, it's like people don't understand the world you
Right.
live in, and you really start to disassociate yourself a little bit. You've got to be careful not to do that too much, because you are still part of the human race.
Right.
But it's very easy to do that because you think to yourself, you've gone into an area where you think it's a lonely, lonely area, and it causes disassociation, and that can be a problem sometimes. But that's because it just truly is so profound. That's the reason why it happens. That's how it infects us, in ourselves.
Yeah, it really is. Trey, look, we'll have to wrap this up because I'm conscious we're getting on for time. But I mean, it's been absolutely fascinating speaking to you. But I mean, what have you got upcoming? I know you've got another book,
Right.
Yeah, it's
out,
the
and you've got a
second book.
documentary. So, the floor is yours, my friend. Speak to me about some stuff you've got coming up.
Yeah, the first book, The Meadow Project, is still out there. That's kind of talks about our experiences up to 2020. The second book, Return to the Meadow, is from 2020 to probably about November of last year. I also have some very interesting parts in that, in the part called Revelation, which is the third part of the book, where we actually did hypnotic regression with some of our team members, and we see things that are, we have missing time. We have an experience that sounds very much like a typical abduction phenomena, which is, not necessarily aliens. It could be something totally different. So, that's my second book. I also talk about the cubes and the monkey bear lady, and go into a lot of that. I have a documentary. We did the premiere last week. We're getting ready, hopefully soon, to distribute it. It's called The Meadow Project. Pretty neat. Tony Merkel and his team came out and researched with us. People can find me at Trey Hudson dash author on Facebook, TreyHudsonResearch.com, and my email address is TreyHudsonResearch@gmail.com. I love to hear from people, kind of like Steve said. Hey, we're all in this together, and I'm just so humbled to have friends like on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, and I'm just happy to be part of this. It's a great time. I feel very honored and I'm very humbled. And I want to thank you all for having me, and thank you for all the kind words and words of encouragement.
It's been an
Wonderful.
absolute pleasure, and I'm sure you second that, Steve. So,
Oh, absolutely. It's always a pleasure. I was just curious, how did the premiere go? How was it received?
It went well from what we're hearing. People really liked it. We probably didn't do as much marketing on the front end as we probably should have. Uh, So,
Okay.
that's something to learn. Hopefully, we'll be getting the distribution details ironed out. I'm proud of the film. I think it worked out. It's really neat that, when I briefed the team before they went out there, the guest researchers, a lot of the things that I predicted came true, like something that we're encountering, which is very odd, maybe, is
Yeah.
people's faces will morph, will change in front of
Oh,
you.
oh, yes,
A-
yes, yes.
And they got to experience that themselves. So, yeah, it's a neat film. And I'm just things couldn't be better. I'm just so happy at this time of my life that I'm still able to get out there and research. And I probably won't have the answer once I cross over to that other dimension. Maybe I'll look back and go, that's what it's about. But it's fun to have a mystery to
Isn't
explore.
it? It is.
Yeah, it really is.
absolutely is. Trey, look, thank you ever so much for joining us. I know you're a busy man. It's been absolutely fascinating speaking to you. It really, really has. So,
No,
thank you ever so much, sir.
Thank you.
thank
And
you, gentlemen.
thank you guys as well for joining us. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. Make sure you check us out on social media, and make sure you check out the Anomaly Project podcast.com for further articles, news, and information. Until next time, goodbye and take care.